Okay, a gute Woche, a freiliche Woche. This coming week is the week we read about how Hashem appeared to Abraham. And there's a famous story of the Rebbe Rashab when he was 4 or 5 years old. He went to his grandfather, Tzemach Tzedek, on his birthday, and he was crying, he asked his grandfather, why is it that Hashem appears to Abraham and he does not appear to me? So Tzemach Tzedek responded that when a Jew is 99 years old, he makes a decision to circumcise himself, he deserves that Hashem should appear to him. That's what Tzemach Tzedek said. And one nuance in this story is how Hashem responds to us according to where we are. Avram deserved that God should appear to him because he circumcised himself at the age of 99. And Hashem relates to us and appears to us according to where we are. Avram at his level, and every one of us on our level. And I think it's an important point to realize that Hashem is always connected to us and giving us signs of where we need to be and what we need to do. And I want to share a few stories in that regard. Not always is it so obvious and so apparent, but if we have faith in Hashem, we trust in Hashem, then Hashem shows us how the dots connect. I'll share with you a story about a gentleman. I don't know his name, so he shared the story anonymously to Ami magazine. And the story is like this. He was interested in working in a prison, and for very altruistic reasons. I myself have visited many prisons, and I could tell you that being in a prison isn't an easy place for a number of reasons. And one of them is that each prison is basically like its own government. There are laws in America of how prisons are meant to be run, but by and large, each prison is its own environment, depending on the warden, depending on the guards, and the inmates often suffer because of people which are very cruel. Some people become prison guards because they're sadistic and cruel. So this gentleman, he was the opposite. He was altruistic and caring, and he wanted to work specifically in Rikers Island, which is like the Alcatraz of New York. He wanted to work there because he felt that he could be supportive of these unfortunate people. And he had been an Army veteran, and so there's a certain requirement of years of service in order to be able to work in Rikers Island. And he applied for this job. But every time he presented his candidacy for this position, it was rejected. He didn't know why it was rejected. Meanwhile, his wife was working as a librarian, and his 2 children married, living away, and he was working as a security in a high tech company, and he also moonlighted as working as a guard in exclusive events. But he really was passionate, and he applied year and again to work in Rikers Island. After 5 years of applying, he finally was accepted, and he had to go for an 8-week training course. So the 8-week training course wasn't a big deal for him. He worked in the military, and his first day of work ended up being last year on October 9th, 2023. So it was right after October 7th. And he was taking this exclusive bus to the prison. And this bus would go to the Rikers Island Bridge, the only route for cars. And the campus of the prison is very big. It is about 413 acres in between Queens and the Bronx. And it's this island in the East River in New York. And he the way it worked in the prison is that you wouldn't just be given one position and stay in that position, but you would be switched around from prison to prison because of, in order that the inmates shouldn't become too familiar for security reasons. The inmates shouldn't become too familiar with you, and the guards shouldn't become too familiar with the inmates. So they would move them around. And although he wanted this position, but when he actually got there, he was completely astonished with the level of hopelessness and despair and depression and sadness that enveloped the environment in Rikers Island, which all the more enforced why he had decided to become part of this. But he was very thankful every day to come home after being in that very terrible environment. Anyway, so his first position was to work on a certain corridor, to patrol this corridor, and to introduce himself to inmates. And then after that, he was rotated to work in the general discipline in the prison. And um, he every few weeks they rotate him from one position to another. And because he was really caring about the inmates, he developed a reputation as someone who was more fair than most of the guards, and someone who wouldn't take advantage of them. Um, and he said, I encourage inmates to use their time while they're there wisely, and to have an attorney, have a lawyer represent them in court. Many of the inmates there suffer, unfortunately, from mental illness, and he would try to encourage them, smile at them, make them feel better. No inmate knew that he was Jewish. He felt that was safer to keep his Jewishness a secret. That's what he felt. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but that's what he felt. And he was working the job for a couple of months, and he had this dream. The dream, he's sitting in a shul, the shul that he prays in every morning, and he's reading the last section of Parsha Shlach, which talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis. He's reading the section of the Torah about wearing tzitzis. And when he wakes up, he remembered his dream, and he didn't usually remember any dreams, but it stayed in his head. And he, based upon his halacha guidance, didn't usually wear tzitzis. He felt that it wasn't good for security reasons to have tzitzis. But that day, he decided he's going to wear the tzitzis. Halacha does mandate that a four-corner garment has to have tzitzis, and it is customary to always wear tzitzis in order to be surrounded with mitzvahs. But because of security reasons, he felt that he wasn't obligated to try to wear tzitzis and to wear a four-corner garment at all times. But that day, he put on the tzitzis. When he gets to Rikers Island, he learned that they had assigned him to a new, unfamiliar section of this large complex. They assigned him to an area where new inmates had arrived, inmates who were going to be shipped out of state where they would face charges. They were temporarily assigned to Rikers Island, but they were going to be shipped out to other facilities where they would have to face charges and go to court. So he began his routine, clocked in, the roll call, and then he began his visits, introducing himself. And he's a remarkable man. He introduced himself to inmates. Hi, is there anything I could do here to make your stay here more comfortable? It's not the kind of thing you ever hear in a prison. It's not the way the guards speak to people. But that's who he was. And he goes to one inmate in one cell. He says, yeah, actually this inmate was diabetic. He had no insulin. He needs insulin. Goes to the second cell. How are you? I need a blanket. I'm freezing. He worked on getting him another blanket. A third guy told him he couldn't sleep the whole night. And then he goes into the fourth cell. In the fourth cell, he sees this slim young man with a full beard and tzitzis, with a napkin on his head in lieu of a yarmulke. And this new inmate introduces himself to this guard with a whisper, and he had to move forward to hear his name. He says, my name is Yosef. So he said, how can I help you, Yosef? So Yosef, he was really shocked to see this innocent, from religious young man in Rikers Island, and his stomach was doing somersaults. So Yosef says, I just got here yesterday, and the guards confiscated all my stuff. And I don't need all my stuff right now, but they took away some religious items, and I'm sure that you know what they are, but I need them very badly. For example, I have something I wear every day called tzitzis. It's a four-cornered garment where there are these strings attached to the garment, and it's something that's very special to me, and I don't have it. And I'm sorry to burden you, but with this really, really matters a lot to me. So Yosef was like overwhelmed with emotion, and all his words came out with a rush. And after he said this, he had to like take a breath. And in that moment, he gestured while Yosef was taking a breath. He gestured to him that he should wait a second. He opened up the two top buttons of his shirt. He pulls out a pair of tzitzis. Yosef's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Wow, what are the chances of meeting someone who keeps mitzvahs in the middle of this place? So the guard asked Yosef, Yosef, what are you doing here? How'd you get here? So Yosef began his story, and as the law warrants, to stand at a certain distance from the inmate. So he's sitting there and listening to Yosef's story. Yosef said that he's from Houston, and his parents are secular Israelis working in high tech, and his older brother was excelled in school. He graduated with honors, but Yosef said, I drifted a little bit. I got involved with teens who were not such good people. And one of my friends taught me how to hotwire a car. And we learned how to evade security cameras and to stay away from vehicles with tracking devices and alarms. And we earned a lot of money in stealing cars before we got caught. When I got caught, since I was a first-time offender, so I got off pretty easy, but my accomplice got several years in prison. And my parents were devastated, but at that time I didn't really care so much about my parents. And I ended up couch surfing, going to different couches, different friends. And eventually I spent several months in a homeless shelter. In my lowest point, this Chabad rabbi discovered me, and he invited me to his home. He treated me like his own son. Make a long story short, when I turned 23 years old, I turned my life around, and I was in touch with my parents, and I decided that I wanted to go study in yeshiva. So I wanted to learn, what does it mean to be a religious Jew. So a week before I left, I was driving around and I was pulled over by a cop. I got a speeding ticket, and he warned me that I have a few outstanding tickets and I need to pay them. But I was about to leave to Israel. I didn't take care of them. I just was in a rush to get everything else ready, and I forgot about it. I spent 5 years in yeshiva in Israel. When I came back to New York in order to begin shidduchim, in order to try to find my soulmate, that's why I came back and come to JFK, and I present my passport very calmly. And then all of a sudden, they're at the in JFK, the security is asking for backup, and they surrounded me and they arrested me. What happened is that I was being arrested for contempt of court, shackle, say shackle, and contempt of court because I had noticed to appear in court because of all my tickets, and my passport had been flagged for these violations. So I eventually ended up here in Rikers Island, where I'm being held until the city of Houston decides how to deal with me. And tell you the truth, I don't know how I'll survive here. So Yosef broke down crying. And this guard said, I promise to move heaven and earth to help you. Within a week, he arranged that all of his tickets were paid, and Yosef was able to leave the prison. And 6 months later, Yosef is sort of thriving in the yeshiva in New York, doing really well. And Yosef always remained in touch with his gentleman, and he called him jokingly, but not so jokingly, his guardian angel. There is a place and a time that Hashem puts each of us, and we need to be open for that purpose of why Hashem puts us where we are. And it may seem like that it's coincidental, but it's not. We have to be open to what Hashem is asking of us. On that note, I want to repeat a story to those who weren't here this morning. The story is about, I heard from Rabbi Zalman Tachtel about Rabbi Chaim Danziger, who was Rebbe's emissary in Rostov. He was in Israel for several weeks, and with his family. And there are a lot of kosher items that are available in Israel which aren't available in Rostov. So when it came time for his family to return to Rostov, he had 7 suitcases full of stuff, and he's in Ben Gurion Airport, and this past week, and as you may have heard, unfortunately there was a terrorist attack, and a missile hit the tarmac in Ben Gurion, and so instead of the flight taking off, the whole airport closes, everyone goes into the bomb shelters and security rooms, and the flight that was supposed to leave from Israel to Rostov was canceled because they were supposed to be picked up from a flight coming from Rostov to Israel, and that was meant to fly back to Rostov. The problem was the flight from Rostov to Israel, because the airport closed, that airplane had to land somewhere else, and it wanted to land in Turkey to refuel. But Turkey, anti-Semites, they said to the plane, "Where are you traveling to?" We're traveling to Israel. I said, "Okay, we're not accepting your plane unless you travel back to Rostov. You cannot travel to Israel with our gas that we're going to refuel you with." So the plane refueled and went back to Rostov, and that's why the flight was canceled. So he and his wife and children, in their 7 suitcases, they're there for 8 hours in Rostov, in Israel, in the airport, and after 8 hours, they have to go now to the baggage claim to get their bags, and of course they're completely wiped out. But this Rabbi Chaim Danziger, is thinking to himself, "I'm here for a reason. There's a reason I'm here. There's divine providence. These 8 hours I'm here must be for a purpose." And he's looking around, and he sees another man with a kippah, with a yarmulke, and he goes over to the guy. He says, "Where are you from?" He says, "I am from uh, Petegorsk." Petegorsk. When he heard of that, he asked him again, "Where are you from?" Guy thought the rabbi must be drunk. He's like, "I just told you, Petegorsk." He said, "I can't believe you said that." He said, "I have been trying to get in touch with someone in Petegorsk for a while because I have a friend who is living in Petegorsk, and they need an oncologist desperately because of they have Yanamachon, they have the illness that we don't even want to say that starts with a C, and they want to speak to this oncologist, but unfortunately, this top oncologist in Petegorsk has a waiting list, and they're not going to be able to see him for several months." They asked me, "Do I have any?" It's a Jewish oncologist. Maybe I know someone who knows someone who could get in touch with him. I said, "What's his name?" This guy with the kippah asked Rabbi Danziger. He tells him his name. He said, "I know that guy. He's my best friend." He takes out his phone on the spot. He calls the oncologist who answered his call, and they arrange an appointment for the very next day at 4 o'clock. It's certain that the reason Rabbi Danziger felt that he was there was in order to help this man who needed to find this oncologist, and Hashem had placed him there for that purpose, for that reason. So this is something that, I mean, we don't have to wait in the airport for 8 hours to realize that. We just need to be open to realizing that whatever's happened to us is by Hashem's hand and for a purpose. And Hashem is responding to us and listening to us. There's a story that I've heard many times, but I was able to ratify the story with relatives of the one that the story happened with. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, Olav Shalom, who is a prominent mentor to thousands of people throughout the world, someone who's been teaching Torah and Hasidus for decades and decades, who was rabbi of the synagogue called Emunas Yisrael. So he had a niece who unfortunately had a severe he had a medical issue, and the this was really bothering him. He was visiting Israel. He often visited Israel, And in Yerushalayim, there's a famous synagogue called the Churva, but Churva means the ruins. But this synagogue is not actually in ruins. The synagogue, for whatever reason, is called the ruins. But there is another synagogue which actually was in between construction, and it was in a state of ruins, and there was no one who would visit the synagogue. But this rabbi, he wanted to cry out to Hashem for his relative, and he went to this to this uh, to this churva to cry to Hashem, to ask Hashem to have mercy on his relative. And he's davening there and davening there, and in the Shema that we recite at night, there's a verse we say from Tehillim, from chapter 51 in Tehillim, Leiv nishbar v'nitkel kimusizah. A broken heart, a crushed spirit, God does not despise. Whenever he got to that verse, he would just break out crying and talking to Hashem that please don't despise my spirit. Please answer me, Hashem. Please answer me. This is what he's thinking. And he eventually, Baruch Hashem, his relative came out of crisis. And the next time he was in New York and he saw the Rebbe at Klibu Sky, he says to Rabbi Wolfson, when a Jew says the verse, a broken heart, a crushed spirit, Hashem does not despise, and he says it and he means it, can accomplish something. You can imagine what kind of a validation he felt. We don't understand these ways of tzaddikim, but imagine, you're talking to Hashem, and then you get a message back from Hashem directly from the tzaddik of the generation. Imagine how that feels. So that's how he felt, of course, when he heard that message from the Rebbe. On that note, I want to share with you one more story of the Rebbe, which also highlights the idea of divine providence. Hashem takes care of each of us individually. Miraculous story that Rabbi Yosef Minkowitz shared to the Deher magazine. Rabbi Yosef Minkowitz in 1969, who was traveling with 8 other yeshiva students, going to a wedding in Boston from New York, and they had traveled to the wedding, and they were on the way back to New York from Boston. While they were on their way back, about an hour away from their destination, they were approaching their exit. They slowed down to get into the exit lane, but there was an 18-wheeler truck in that lane, and he was going too fast to stop. And so when they moved to the next lane, he tried to avoid them. But instead of avoiding them, he hit their side, and that caused the car to spin out of control. And they were driving a station wagon, 3 boys in each row of seats, 9 boys. And he hit the left side of the car, and it spun and hit till it hit a guardrail. And the car became full of flames. And Rabbi Yosef Minkowitz shared that he was sitting right on top of the gas tank, and there was fire everywhere. And the people in the front seat, they were able to get out. People in the back seat, miraculously, the window got sucked out from the impact, so they were able to get out from the back through the window. But people in the middle, he said, I was in the middle seat, and I tried to open the door, and I saw my flesh burning. And the door, the handle of the door was bent out of shape, so I couldn't open the door. So everyone in the back seat, in the center, in the second aisle, the second lane, second row, was stuck there. We couldn't get out, and they were trapped. The fire was all around them. He said, I said Shema, thinking this is my last moments. Then a miracle happened. One of the boys managed to open the right side of the car. He was on the left side of the car. One of the boys managed to open the right side, and they managed to get out. He said, thankfully, Baruch Hashem was wearing a suit made out of synthetic fiber, which wasn't so flammable, and his arm wasn't burnt so badly, but many other parts of his body, like his hands and his face, were severely burnt. And as soon as he got out of the car, literally seconds after he got out of the car, the whole car burst into flames, was gone. When the police came, the firemen came, the police asked how many people had died. And they said no one. The police were shocked. They said, we never saw an accident like this. where there were survivors. So earlier that year, on the last day of Pesach, and by the Mashiach Seudah, the Rebbe was speaking about how people should not leave the neighborhood of Crown Heights. How in many neighborhoods in America, the neighborhood changed, and people didn't like the change in the neighborhood, and all Jews left huge areas in Chicago and many other cities because of the change in the neighborhood. But the Rebbe said that we can't leave a Jew behind, and not everyone is able to leave, and not everyone wants to leave, and everyone can leave, and therefore, just because the neighborhood is changing, you're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to leave Crown Heights. That's what we're speaking about. And everyone else, Crown Heights used to not only be Chabad, Crown Heights used to be full of all kinds of Jews, but when the neighborhood changed, everyone left. But the Rebbe was very clear that no one should leave. So the Rebbe spoke that year, Tafshin Chavtes, 1969, about this. And the Rebbe asked Rabbi Yoel Kahn, the one who memorized all of the Rebbe's talks and prepared them for publication, that he wanted this talk to be published. He published in the journal called Hapardes, and to be published by itself. And Rabbi Yoel prepared it, he worked on it, he sent it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe added many notes and references. And then he sent it again to the Rebbe added more edits, but the Rebbe never submitted it for publication. But all of a sudden, on Monday, on the 7th of Tammuz, before evening prayers, the Rebbe said they should publicize it. They gave out for publication. And the Rebbe added a note, a last note. And the note was a teaching of the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe said that after a fire you become rich. And the reason is because it's a teaching of Kedoshei Elyon, of holy supernal beings. I'm not sure what Kedoshei Elyon means. It means holy tzaddikim. So there's a saying from holy tzaddikim that after you fire you become rich. Why do you become rich? Because after Hashem's judgment comes Hashem's mercy. So if a person experienced, God forbid, judgment, if she experienced gvura, experienced fire, so that's a preparation for the next thing which is going to come, which is Hashem's mercy. And that's why there's a saying of tzaddikim that after a fire you become wealthy. So the Rebbe said that they should print this immediately. I mean, Rebbe said this talk on Passover time, but he didn't submit it to publication until the 7th of Tammuz, right before the evening prayer, and he added right before it was printed this edition that the Alter Rebbe said and the Tzemach Tzedek said, how after fire you become wealthy. So after the accident, the 3 boys who were in the middle seat went to the hospital, but the other boys left out a scratch. The next morning, Rabbi Minkowitz's cousin, Meir Minkowitz, went to the Rebbe's office to tell the Rebbe what had happened. And he told Rabbi Chadakov, sorry about that. Rabbi Chadakov went into the Rebbe's room, and he was Rebbe's personal secretary. He comes out of the room, and he was pale. He said that the Rebbe added the part about the fire because he had these boys in mind. Obviously, we don't know how tzaddikim work. We don't understand this whole thing, but Rebbe added those words because he had those boys in mind. Later that day, after the afternoon prayers, the Rebbe's other secretary, Rabbi Groner, went into the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe asked him for more details about the accident. And the Rebbe said to Rabbi Groner, it seems that it was for their sake that I gave out this talk last night. It seems it was for their sake, because that talk mentions how we become rich after a fire. Then the Rebbe asked Rabbi Groner to give each of the boys a copy of the talk, even before it was ready for publicity. Even before it was printed properly, they should all immediately get a copy. And then they would give a blessing specifically to Yosef Minkowitz, who was severely burned, to have a complete and speedy recovery. So he was in the hospital. He was bandaged again, his face, his hands, his head. And when he came back to Crown Heights. He was discharged. Um, he received a phone call in the hospital. Sorry, after he was in the hospital, he received a phone call from Mechadakov, asking him how he was doing. And he asked, told Mechadakov that he's doing well, he's alive, Baruch Hashem, he's recuperating. He asked Rabbi Chanukov, please ask the Rebbe, what should I do right now? And Rabbi Chanukov asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said he should ask the opinion of 2 doctors. Okay. The next 2 Farbrengens, Rebbe again mentioned this accident and these boys, and how after Hashem's judgment comes Hashem's mercy. Now, here's the amazing thing. As time went on, Rabbi Minkowitz said the skin on his hand wasn't healing, and the doctor was adamant that he needed a skin graft. So he went to visit the Rebbe for his birthday. His birthday is this time of the year, after the holiday season, after Tishrei. He went into the Rebbe's office, and he told the Rebbe that what the doctors are saying, he needs a skin graft. The Rebbe is looking at his letter, and the Rebbe got to that point of the letter. The Rebbe said these words, Vos naktoirim wegen azal. What do doctors know about such things? And the Rebbe instructed him to not do the skin graft, and miraculously, the skin healed completely on its own. Vos naktoirim wegen azal. What do doctors know about such things? There is, the way we look at things naturally. Then there is, the Torah tells us this week, we just read the Shabbos, Lechacha me'artzecha, go out of our desires, out of our preconceived notions, and to be open to communicate with Hashem, to be open to hear how Hashem is communicating with us, what Hashem is asking of us, and to be open to communicate to Hashem, to talk to Hashem, and know that Hashem is listening. And Hashem should hear our prayers, pray of all of us, that just like Hashem appeared to Avram, we should all see how Hashem appears to each of us. So the coming of Mashiach Tzidkeinu.
Rabbi Levin, sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask for 30 seconds of clarification on 2 stories that you said, please?
Sure.
Okay. So just as a side note, the story about the Rabbi telling the man, Lev Nishbar, that had broken heart, Hashem does not despise. I heard a similar story. Maybe it's the same story. The rabbi was going to have heart surgery, or he had a certain heart problem, and he came to the rabbi for a bracha. And as then they said, I'm going to have this heart procedure, and the rabbi said, in the merit of you saying this pasuk every night, everything is going to go well. So just as a side note, that I heard the story.
No, it's. I don't know if that story is true or not. It's a different story. I heard it.
Okay, it's a different story.
It's a different story. But I mentioned I heard it directly from the family this week.
Oh, my apologies. My apologies. And then the main thing I wanted to say is this, Rabbi. You said that the Rebbe said after a fire comes Hashem's mercy, and So one thing I wanted to mention to myself and to many people out there in the community, unfortunately, after people have personal challenges, financial, relationship, whatever, they're so focused on, the Yetzer Hara keeps the people so focused on resentment and disappointment and frustration.
I'm sorry, I need to go, but I just wanted to say that it's not just for fire; it's all negative things.
After
judgment comes Hashem's mercy.
Oh yes.
Sorry, guys, I just gotta go. You can message me in private.